You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 13th of June. IKEA in race row after trying to ban gypsies from their car parks. Iranian bus driver thought he hit a fox. Army future at risk with cull of most experienced officers. Euro close to total meltdown. UN official declares Syrian crisis a civil war. Tunisia, conservative Islamists riot over art exhibit. Thought for the day, the problems caused by Islam. Finally, man writing Kindness in America book is shot by a gunman. UK news. The Swedish furniture giant IKEA is at the centre of a racism row after security guards were employed to prevent gypsies entering its car parks by stopping suspicious vans, caravans and mobile homes from their store car parks. Luke Massey, 27, was taken aback when a security guard challenged him during a trip to the Valley store in Croydon, South London. They had been shopping here before, but this time they arrived in a small camper van. The store has taken this step to prevent gypsies from camping in their car park. Whilst the PC Brigade is fuelling the racist campaign, IKEA insists they are only protecting their customers and business interests. Conversation between Massey and the security attendant was recorded, and the attendant is quoted as saying, "We are stopping them because they are coming in and taking things off our loyal customers, and that is why I'm here in the car park." A World at 8 reporter commented, "Firstly, how can a conversation be recorded in a car park without premeditation, which I find very odd. Secondly, it is about time someone looked after the customers nowadays, not pander to potential troublemakers." A bus driver thought he hit a fox. It is alleged in Blackfriars Crown Court that bus driver, Iranian-born Sharia Farouzian, killed student Ming Wai Tan from Singapore after hitting and dragging her under his bus for half a mile. Farouzian denies causing death by careless driving, as he thought he had run over a bottle and then later a fox. It is alleged that he struck Miss Tan as she crossed the street. Farouzian only learned of Miss Tan's death the next day when his employer Metro Line suspended him. The case continues. Army future at risk with cull of most experienced officers. The Telegraph's defence correspondent, Thomas Harding, reports politicians and commanders are concerned that the armed forces' future is at risk after losing a generation of its most experienced officers. The Ministry of Defence has sacked almost 4,000 serving members, amongst them 300 Army, 250 Royal Air Force and 70 Royal Navy officers. These numbers include 8 brigadiers, 60 lieutenant colonels, 15 air commodores and 17 Navy captains. They go on to report military-style analysts have said 1 in 6 of those made redundant is a mid-ranking officer, often the leader of operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, who have experienced the widest range of combat among any generation. The Army is set to make at least 2 more rounds of redundancies in the coming years, with recruitment also cut by a fifth. A World at 8 writer says, "We lost many of our best and brightest in World War I and II. Now the government is determined to send our experienced servicemen and women to the knacker's yard." Euro news. The euro close to total meltdown. Following the $125 billion Spanish bailout, the market reaction remains mixed, prompting a London hedge fund manager to say, "The situation in Europe continues to be close to total meltdown. Interest rates in Spain and Italy have reached unsustainable levels again, and Germany is not going to accept euro bonds for many years." On Tuesday, Spain's long-term borrowing costs soared to their highest level since the country joined the Eurozone. Investors have apparently concluded that the rescue is potentially a much better deal for the banks and their shareholders than for the government, its taxpayers and bondholders. World news. UN official declares Syrian crisis a civil war. When UN Under-Secretary for Peacekeeping Operations Hervé Latsous was asked by a Reuters correspondent whether the Syrian crisis could now be characterised as a civil war, he replied, "Yes, I think we can say that." When CNN asked Mr Latsous' spokesman Karen Dyer to confirm the remark, Mr Dyer replied, "Whether we call it all-out civil war, whether we call it partial civil war in some places, the point is that it's hugely escalated and that it's across nearly all parts of the country and that the civilians, ordinary Syrian people, are the ones that are suffering." The world headlines on Syria say it all. The US Secretary of State accuses Russia of sending attack helicopters to Syria. The Syrian regime slams the United States, accusing it of supporting terrorists. Syrian children used as shields by loyalists. Rebels recruiting children. Intervention not right path in Syria, warns NATO chief. Only a soldier speaks with the voice of reason. NATO chief Anders Fogh Rasmussen, in a speech to Australian journalists, has warned foreign military intervention was not the right path in Syria, calling instead for a political solution as envisaged by UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan. Tunisia, conservative Islamists riot over art exhibit. Thousands of ultraconservative Salafist Muslims, angered by an art exhibition they say insults Islam, rampaged through parts of Tunis and other cities on Tuesday, posing one of the biggest threats yet to Tunisia's democratic transition. The government imposed a nighttime curfew on the capital and 7 other areas as protesters hurled rocks and gasoline bombs at police stations, a courthouse and the offices of secular parties. The clashes began after an art exhibit in an upscale suburb provoked an outcry. The work that appears to have caused the most fury spelled out the name God using insects. Thought for the day. My thought today is the Islamic problem that Europe and most parts of the world are having now, or most certainly will have in the future. First may I point out that even in the face of so-called racism, the oranges of which I have gone into in a previous World at 8, the question of religious intolerance is more dangerous than ever racism is or was. It runs the gamut of being either totally pushed under the carpet or indeed in some countries encouraged as the total culture of that country. Religious intolerance covers a wide range of hate crimes in my book. That of actively converting a people, either by war or man-made laws, active enmity towards a certain religion or its people for no reason other than they are different, forbidding any reference to a country's given religion in favour of a new religion, covering religious intolerance crimes by the term racist crimes, or then again just putting the whole kit and caboodle under the race hate crimes. In truth, the fact that all of the Muslim groomings are perpetrated not by the Asian community, as one Muslim puts it in the UK, but by members of the Muslim community is totally ignored. The powers that be, who seem to be intent on reducing this country and the West to third world caliphates, are acting under religious hate crime, as the message of Islam can be and is adopted by members of all races, black, white, brown, coffee, et al. This is why the message of Islam is so powerful to the ignorant, stupid and frightened people who are not born into its folds. It is not a racist message, but it is a religion which does not tolerate other religions in the same space they occupy or wish to occupy. I had a conversation many years ago with an Indian who was a Hindu in, of all places, Hong Kong, before the handover. Although I was interested in world politics even then, I had not done much research on the Muslim question, which in all fairness was, at that time around 1977, not endemic throughout the UK as it is nowadays. He told me that India before the Mughal Muslim invasion was a lovely country. Even we Brits didn't tear it apart later the way the Muslims did during partition, amply helped by the British government. As usual, they blackmailed their way into obtaining Pakistan for Islam. My friend said, and I quote, "Wherever you get Muslims, you get problems." I thought this a sweeping statement even though he had lived through partition, but now I think it was prophetic. It is sad but true that due to the religious intolerance of the majority of Muslim population in any country, you get civil war, or rather religious defence wars, as I prefer to call them. During the last half of the last century, and certainly becoming more so this century, the sheer amount of troubles that accompany this particular religion is overwhelming and recorded. I'm leaving out the partial conquering of Europe in the Middle Ages by the Muslim hordes and that history. The media of course do not see it this way. To say that the Muslims cause all the civil strife we have seen during the last 50 years would be wrong, but they certainly have contributed more than their fair share to them. Right off 2 world wars, certain tribal goings on in Africa in the 50s and Argentina, and I believe we can say, without fear of contradiction, that Muslims have caused or been party to most of the unpleasantness ever since. The media is party to a gigantic pro-Muslim conspiracy. They always ignore the awful and vile hate clerics because these bastards operate under the religious radar. They attack the Christian way of life in a country that is mainly Christian, if not practising. They do not attack our colour. Now if we, as white Christians, attack it back, it is always deemed racist and a hate crime. There is one law for them and one law for us. And this is in our own country. Imagine what it is like for people who are non-Muslim in places like Nigeria. The Muslims there can get away literally with murder because it is Muslim against Christian, and nowadays Us Christians cannot seem to win because we would be the racist ones. This general unfairness can be seen throughout the history of modern times. Bosnia was a prime example of history being written by the victors, namely the United Morons and the Muslims. Now, without going on for pages on this awful war, for many years Christians had been under attack from the Muslims and finally decided to take their country back. This was not the tale from the BBC or ITV. They paraded the poor Muslims having been living in peace for many years with their neighbours, etc, etc. They paraded a particularly skinny Muslim guy hanging onto a barbed wire fence and the world cried. I did, but with anger. So there we have it. Muslims always live in peace, in harmony, cause no civil trouble, keep their populations in check, always accommodate differing religions, blah, blah, blah. Whereas no one community is all bad, there are very few that are all good either. To settle that answer, why is it all the guys in the dock at The Hague are white and Christian? Did not Muslims rape, torture and kill as well? We come then to Africa, fast going the way of Arabia, Muslims wall to wall. Indeed, in North Africa this has been helped by Muslim on Muslim warfare, amply helped again by United Morons and the West. Indeed, when the Muslim population stops colonising Europe, they find they want to convert or kill members of their own religion, rather like the Papists and the Protestants. See where religious intolerance comes in? Poor old Assad is fighting a war with a general ineptitude and bullying from the people supporting the Islamic extremists, because that is what they are. He would do better to leave the country before he is shot, but he probably feels some loyalty towards many of his people who do support him. Next on the line will be Tunisia, mark my words. The entire Middle East will be an Islamic fundamentalist state, and it will be the fault of the West completely. Religious intolerance again. Why should we support Islam in any way? Beats me. Then we have the poor old UK groaning under the weight of continuous encroaching parasitical Muslim clans that come in every day. The government has long since given up giving the real figures for the Muslim immigration. Again, these people operate under the name of Allah, which is rather laughable since in many cities in America all references to God are not allowed in certain ceremonies. Does that apply to Allah as well? I bet not, it wouldn't be Christian, would it? The Queen's Jubilee celebrations were mainly white? No, they were mainly Christian, which is right and proper, as she is head of the Anglican Church and keeper of the faith. The media have tried to turn even this into a racist slur, when it is in fact a religious slur, if anything. I think in a country which has been turned into a virtual hellhole of a melting pot, that to see mainly people of my own tribe celebrating was nothing short of a miracle, and long may it continue. Let's not tell the media that the average Muslim doesn't give a flying F about our Queen, who actually has done nothing for them, but equally nothing against. She isn't of their religion. The Hindus and Sikhs probably raised a glass, as did the West Indians. I doubt if the Somalis would, because they are mainly Muslim. Why does the British government persist in this story tale of everyone loving everyone else, being integrated, being mixed up? People gravitate towards their own kind, fact of life. It is in our Bible that each shall seek his own kind, and we live by the Bible, or are supposed to, although I fall miserably short of that one, not having yet learnt to love thy neighbour, let alone an immigrant. So here we have it. A one people practising religious intolerance can and do bring more havoc to the rest of the world. Poor old Burma, having just become more democratised, is now suffering with Muslim protests and burnings. Muslims established a hold in Buddhist Burma in the 11th century, growing from prisoners of war to mercenaries, courtiers, interpreters and advisors. However, in the 16th century the Buddhist king outlawed halal killing and the festival of Eid, when cattle were killed. After all, Burma was and is Buddhist, and killing animals under halal went against their beliefs. After that the Muslims went into a decline and became marginalised. Well, now Burma is feeling the Muslim boot. Buddhists and Muslims in the Rakhine state have attacked each other, prompting the government to declare a state of emergency and impose a dusk to dawn curfew in several areas. Local Buddhists blame the Muslim Rohingya people for the outbreak of violence, which appears to have started when a woman was raped and killed. 3 Muslim men are in custody following the attack. In what seems to be a revenge attack, 10 Muslims were killed in an attack on a bus. There! It seems to be going the way of Bosnia and the rest, doesn't it? Muslim religious intolerance at its best, blaming the differing religion. We had better watch out in the UK, my friends. I feel this particular flame has not yet been truly ignited. And finally, a man hitchhiking across the US while writing a memoir called The Kindness of America has been hurt in a random drive-by shooting, it has been reported by the Telegraph. Ray Doling, who had been sitting by US Highway 2 in Montana, had approached a truck which he thought had stopped to offer him a lift. and the driver shot him in the arm and drove off. Valley County Sheriff Glenn Meyer said the suspected shooter, Charles Danielson III, 52, was arrested 4 hours later and apparently was under the influence of either or both drink and drugs. The sheriff also said there was no previous contact between the two men. Delno's injuries were not life-threatening and he is in hospital. He is not taking any messages or taking calls. A World at 8 writer commented, "I would presume his book will suffer a setback with this one." You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.